That concept being that nothing in your financial life happens in a vacuum. Everything that you do in one area of your finances impacts the other area of your finances. And I'll tell you why I bring that up. It's because when you talk to financial advisors about the benefits or the cons of doing a cash out refinance, they will say, oh, well, you shouldn't do it because you're adding that balance onto something that's being repaid over the course of 20 or 15 or 30 years. And even though it might be beneficial in terms of your monthly payment, spreading out the repayment at interest over such a long period means that you'll pay so much more for it over time as compared to just paying it off where it is. Now, if things did exist in a vacuum, then they would be absolutely right. If that were the only consideration that you had to keep in mind, then you would rarely, if ever, do a cash out refinance. Matter of fact, if you're looking along on screen, we have a scenario where we have a person who's taken out a $50,000 loan for 30 years at 7% interest. And you can see that that additional $50,000 of equity that they access in their home cost them $333 a month to repay, but over the course of 30 years, they're going to pay $69,000 in interest on top of the $50,000 that they borrowed. So that $50,000, by the time they reach the end of their repayment period, actually cost them $119,000. So again, if that were the only consideration, this would be something that they would never do. But the fact of the matter is, it's not the only consideration. You have to keep in mind the fact that these people might be using this equity to pay off credit card debt. They may be using it to pay off a student loan that either has an astronomically high payment or an astronomically high interest rate or some combination of the two. And while it may cost them more over the long term to pay it off over 30 years as compared to the 5 or 10 that may be left on those debts, the fact of the matter is the payments that are associated with those debts may be so high that it keeps them from doing other things that they need to do, like from base level doing things like getting insurance or establishing an estate plan or establishing savings or contributing to their retirement plan. So while yes, in a vacuum you wouldn't want to pay $120,000 to borrow 50, in the short term, if you're looking and you're saying, by taking it and repositioning it in this way, it opens up my ability to access and contribute to all those other things. Putting all of those factors together can still have it make sense. So the second reason that you would use that cash out refinance is if you're using it to position or pay off other debts in a way that increases the flexibility that you have elsewhere in your finances. The third scenario where it could make sense to do a cash out refinance is if somebody else is paying back what you owed for you. So we have people who have used the equity from their home to cash it out and then buy an investment property and rent it out to a long-term tenant, or maybe they're doing a VRBO or an Airbnb. We have people who have even used the equity in their home to use as a down payment on their new and better home, and then they rent out the home from which they took the equity. And if you have a tenant in place or some type of arrangement where you're borrowing the money, and yes, it costs you more over the course of time, but someone else is repaying that debt for you, then it can absolutely make sense to use a cash out refinance and not have to worry about the fluctuating interest rate or the fluctuating payment that comes with the HELOC, or just wondering if you're going to have a plan to repay the principal. You can take it out, and even in the scenario where it increases the interest rate on your property, as long as you have a tenant that's covering the mortgage, the upkeep of the home, it doesn't really matter because the home is cash flowing. You're not having to pay it down at that higher interest rate, and you're still getting the benefit of using that equity to do other things in your financial life.